Do you feel that gnawing anxiety creeping in as summer drags on and the Toronto Maple Leafs haven't made the blockbuster move everyone's expecting? That restless energy of a fan base watching other teams make splashes while their beloved team sits seemingly idle, counting pennies and playing it safe? Well, take a deep breath, because what looks like inactivity might actually be the most calculated chess move this organization has made in years. The Maple Leafs are playing a completely different game than everyone else right now, and most fans are missing the brilliance of their current approach. While other teams are scrambling to fill roster holes with expensive band-aids, Toronto is positioning themselves for something far more significant than a typical summer trade. They're setting up for a potential franchise-altering acquisition that could reshape the entire landscape of the NHL. The Mitch Marner aftermath. Addition by subtraction, let's start with the elephant in the room. On paper, losing Mitch Marner makes the Leafs worse. There's no sugarcoating that reality. But sometimes losing a star player forces an organization to become more creative, more strategic, and ultimately more successful. The Marner departure freed up crucial cap space that the Leafs have used intelligently rather than desperately. The additions of Matthias Maxelli, Nick Roy, and Dakota Joshua represent something more sophisticated than simple roster filling. These three players should combine for over 100 points, which means the Leafs potentially replaced Marner's individual production with depth scoring that's harder to shut down in playoff hockey. Instead of relying on one player to carry offensive load, they've distributed that responsibility across multiple contributors. This shift toward depth over star power addresses one of the fundamental issues that has plagued Toronto in recent playoff runs. When opposing teams could focus their defensive efforts on shutting down a few key players, the Leafs' offense became predictable and ultimately ineffective. The current roster construction makes them significantly more difficult to game plan against. The deceptive strength of the current roster despite the Marner departure, this Toronto roster possesses more underlying strength than most people realize. Austin Matthews remains one of the league's most dominant players, William Nylander continues to evolve into a complete player, and John Tavares provides the kind of veteran leadership that championship teams require. The supporting cast has also improved in ways that don't show up in highlight reels. The depth additions provide legitimate NHL-level production while maintaining the cap flexibility that allows for future moves. This isn't a roster that's simply treading water until they can make a big splash. This is a team that can legitimately compete for playoff positioning while maintaining strategic flexibility. The goaltending situation, anchored by Anthony Stolarz with Joseph Woll as support, provides the kind of stability that allows teams to take calculated risks elsewhere on the roster. Having confidence in your goaltending means you can afford to be patient with other positions rather than making panic moves that compromise long-term flexibility. The cap space mirage. Why trading seems harder than it looks. The easy solution that everyone keeps proposing involves trading players like Kaye Jarnkrok, David Kampf, and Max Domi to create additional cap space for a major acquisition. In theory, moving these three players could free up approximately $8 million in cap space, which combined with their current $2.9 million in flexibility would provide room for a significant addition. But theoretical cap space and practical cap space are two completely different things. Most NHL teams have already solidified their rosters for the upcoming season, and the teams with available cap space are typically rebuilding organizations that aren't interested in taking on middle-tier veterans for future considerations. The timing of such moves also creates complications. Trading players now, in the middle of summer, means accepting whatever return is available rather than waiting for better opportunities. Teams that might be interested in these players during the season when injuries or performance issues arise aren't necessarily interested in acquiring them during the quiet period of the offseason. The 2026 UFA class, a generational opportunity, here's where the Leafs' current strategy transforms from seemingly passive to absolutely brilliant. The 2026 unrestricted free agent class represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to acquire franchise-changing talent. And Toronto has positioned themselves perfectly to take advantage of it. With $24 million in projected cap space for summer 2026, while maintaining their core intact, the Leafs have created flexibility that few teams will be able to match. This isn't just about having money to spend, it's about having the financial freedom to pursue any player who becomes available without having to make corresponding moves to create space. The timing aligns perfectly with their competitive window. By 2026, their current core will still be in their prime years, but they'll have the resources to add the kind of elite talent that transforms good teams into championship contenders. This is strategic roster management at its finest, the deadline strategy. Patience as a weapon. The most intriguing aspect of Toronto's current approach involves their willingness to wait until the trade deadline to make their move. This patience isn't just about finding better deals. It's about accessing players who simply aren't available during the offseason. Names like Kirill Kaprizov, Jack Eichel, Jason Robertson, and Kyle Connor represent the kind of elite talent that teams don't trade during the summer when they're still hoping for competitive seasons. But if these players' teams fall out of playoff contention by the deadline, suddenly they become available to organizations with the cap space and assets to acquire them. The Leafs' current $2.9 million in cap space might seem insignificant now, but it could be the difference between acquiring a game-changing player at the deadline or watching them go to a competitor. This flexibility becomes exponentially more valuable as the season progresses, and teams become more desperate to make moves. The McDavid Factor. Positioning for the impossible. While Connor McDavid entering free agency might seem unrealistic, the Leafs' current strategy positions them as one of the few teams that could realistically pursue him if circumstances change. Having significant cap space, a competitive core, and the financial resources to make a maximum offer creates possibilities that don't exist for most organizations. Even if McDavid ultimately stays in Edmonton, the Leafs' positioning ensures they'll be serious contenders for any elite player who becomes available. This isn't about banking on one specific outcome. It's about creating maximum flexibility to pursue any opportunity that arises. The risk-reward calculation. The biggest risk of Toronto's current approach involves the possibility that their current roster isn't quite good enough to compete for a championship, and by waiting to make moves, they waste a year of their core's prime. But this risk is offset by the potential rewards of accessing elite talent that simply isn't available through traditional trade channels. The Leafs have constructed a roster that should comfortably make the playoffs, which means they're not sacrificing their competitive present for future flexibility. They're maintaining their ability to compete while positioning themselves for potentially franchise-altering acquisitions. The organizational maturity. What's most impressive about Toronto's current approach is how it reflects organizational maturity that has been lacking in previous years. Instead of making desperate moves to address perceived weaknesses, they're playing a longer game that could yield far greater rewards. This patience demonstrates confidence in their current roster's ability to compete while maintaining the flexibility to strike when elite opportunities arise. It's the kind of strategic thinking that separates championship organizations from perpetual contenders. The fan perspective challenge. The most difficult aspect of this strategy involves managing fan expectations during a period that feels like inactivity. Leafs fans are accustomed to dramatic offseason moves and bold statements of intent. The current approach requires faith that patience will yield better results than immediate action. But sometimes the most impactful moves are the ones you don't make. By resisting the urge to force trades or overpay for available players, the Leafs are positioning themselves to be players in markets that don't exist yet. The Toronto Maple Leafs' current approach represents a masterclass in strategic patience and long-term thinking. While other teams are making moves that provide immediate satisfaction but limited upside, the Leafs are positioning themselves for the kind of acquisition that could define the next decade of their franchise. This isn't about being passive or lacking ambition. It's about being smart enough to recognize when the best move is to wait for the right opportunity. The 2026 free agent class and potential deadline acquisitions represent possibilities that far exceed anything available through traditional summer trades. The anxiety you're feeling about Toronto's quiet summer might actually be excitement in disguise. They're not falling behind. They're getting ahead of everyone else in ways that won't be obvious until the payoff arrives. Sometimes the most brilliant strategies are the ones that require the most faith, and right now, the Leafs are asking their fans to trust that patience will be rewarded with something extraordinary. What's your gut feeling about this patient approach? Are you confident that waiting for elite talent is worth the risk of potentially wasting a competitive year, or do you think the Leafs should be more aggressive in pursuing available players right now? I'm curious to hear whether you trust the strategy or if you're getting nervous about the team's quiet summer. Drop your thoughts in the comments and smash that like button if you think the Leafs are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.